And now, marine weather around Alaska.
All right, today's sea ice analysis showing sea ice back to the northeast. There were the persistent milder southwest winds here blowing across the Bering Sea, and I wouldn't look for much change here over the next couple of days in the position of the ice edge there. And from there, looking at tonight's weather again, here's the next storm pushing gale force and eventually storm force winds into the western Aleutians, spreading eastward with precipitation to Adak and Atka late tonight. Another band of snow moves into the southwest part of the state from the Seward Peninsula down into northwest Bristol Bay. This system moving slowly eastward will spread moisture into the Panhandle. Snow continues overnight, northern Cook Inlet, Manuska, Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, and then starts to end slowly from southwest to northeast here over northern Cook Inlet. Partly sunny, Kenai Peninsula, southern Kenai Peninsula, down into Kodiak Island with breezy northwest winds, but nothing too strong. And big storm out west here. Storm force winds, western Aleutians, gales ahead of the front, pushing eastward. And that system tracks eastward and then starts to take a southeast turn here toward the Fox Islands late Saturday and Saturday night. Coastal water forecasts for the Panhandle on the south coast, southerly winds, southerly winds at 20 knots, seas 10 feet. North coast, east winds 25 to 30 knots up here in the extreme north coast, 8 to 9 foot seas there. South 20 for Lynn Canal, southeast 20 to 25 for the central and southern inside channels. And for Saturday, northwest at 10 for Clarence Strait, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots here, Stevens Passage up in toward Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, west 15 on the south coast, southwest to southeast winds 15 knots on the central coast, and the north coast here, east at 15 to 20 knots. Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet, west at 10, southern Cook Inlet, west at 25, even stronger for Kamishak Bay, west winds there at 30 knots with northwest gales in store for the Barren Islands for tomorrow with 10-foot seas. Northwest 30 knots for the western North Gulf Coast. As you can see, east-northeast 25 for the eastern coast, and Prince William Sound, north winds 30 knots with 6-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound on Saturday, east winds down to 20 knots, seas subsiding to 4 feet, south to southwesterlies of 15 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. West side here, southwest at 20 knots, southwest 15 for the Barren Islands, northeast 15 for Kamishak Bay, and variable to northeast winds at 10 knots for Cook Inlet with those seas now back down to 2 feet. Bristol Bay for tomorrow, Friday. West winds 20 knots, Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest winds 20 to 25 knots, seas possibly up to 8 feet. Kodiak Island, west winds 25 to 30 knots with 7-foot seas. And for Saturday, Shelikof Strait, northeast at 25 knots, otherwise southeast winds at 20 knots on the east side of Kodiak. And Bristol Bay, southeast at 20 also, with the Alaska Peninsula looking at small craft advisories for southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, south to southwest winds, 25 to 30 knots. Gale warnings, Adak and Atka ahead of that front, south winds 35 knots. And Amchitka Island all the way out to Shemya, storm warnings for 50 to 60 knot winds from the south to east. And then for Saturday, storm warnings shifting eastward here as that low tracks due east, and then starts to take a southeast turn here. So we've got 50 to 55 knot winds now from about Kiska Island eastward to Adak and Atka, and in toward Nikolsky on Alaska Island. You'll be looking at west winds at 40 knots with seas 15 to 25 feet. And for the southwest coast, southern Nunivak Island, southwest at 15 knots, northwest at 10 for the Yukon Delta coast. St. Lawrence Island, west winds up here at about 15 knots, but brisk wind advisories for 25 knot westerlies in Norton Sound. St. Matthew Island, variable winds 20 knots, 7-foot seas, west at 20 knots with 9-foot seas for the Pribilofs. And for Saturday, southeast winds at 20 for St. Paul and St. George, but northeast 35 knot gales there for St. Matthew Island. Kuskokwim Delta coast, east at 25. Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, and the Yukon Delta coast, northeast winds 15 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea tomorrow, north to northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, western Arctic coast northeast at 10, east at 15 for the central coast, and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east winds at 10 knots. East winds 10 to 15 knots here for the central and eastern coastline up there, and northwest at 10 on the western coast, and the Chukchi Sea north winds 15 to 25 knots.